You're telling me this is our replacement? The room fell silent for only a heartbeat before a wave of restrained laughter rolled across the training hall, and every pair of eyes shifted toward the young woman standing quietly beside the steel entrance doors. Emily Carter adjusted the strap of the worn olive-green duffel bag resting on her shoulder without saying a word. At 27 years old, with fair skin, light brown hair secured in a regulation bun, and an expression that revealed nothing beyond calm patience, she looked exactly like what everyone assumed she was, just another recruit arriving late to an elite training cycle. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished concrete floor as instructors reviewed paperwork at the front of the room while dozens of service members lined the walls waiting for orientation to begin. Boots shuffled, coffee cups rested on folding tables, and conversations drifted through the air with the casual confidence that always appeared when experienced personnel believed they had already figured someone out. A tall corporal glanced at Emily's name tag before smirking at the soldier beside him. Carter. Never heard of her. His friend shrugged. Probably another transfer hoping to impress somebody. Another voice joined in. She doesn't exactly look like she's been around long. Emily heard every word. Years of military service had trained her ears to notice conversations that most people thought were private, but she offered no reaction. Instead, she quietly carried her duffel toward the final empty seat in the back row, carefully placing it beneath the chair before standing at parade rest. She neither defended herself nor attempted to introduce herself. The silence around her almost invited more assumptions. One instructor looked briefly in her direction before returning to the attendance roster. Another recruit leaned over and whispered, "I give her 3 days before she requests reassignment." A few nearby chuckled. The comments were never loud enough to become official disrespect, yet they were loud enough for their target to hear. Emily simply kept her attention forward. Outside, the cool Virginia morning carried the distant rhythm of cadence calls from another training field while helicopters crossed the sky beyond the tree line. Inside the building, anticipation mixed with quiet competition. Every person believed they were about to prove something. Every person believed they understood the competition standing around them. None of them realized they had already overlooked the one person who had absolutely nothing left to prove. A clipboard landed sharply on the front table as Commander Ethan Brooks entered the room with measured confidence. His reputation traveled faster than he ever needed to introduce himself. Conversation stopped almost instantly. Every soldier straightened. Brooks slowly scanned the room, saying nothing at first, his eyes passing across every face until, for the briefest fraction of a second, they rested on Emily Carter. No expression crossed his face. No greeting. No acknowledgement. He simply continued down the line as though nothing unusual had happened. The recruits noticed nothing, but the senior instructors exchanged quick glances that disappeared almost as fast as they came. Somewhere inside the administrative offices, a sealed personnel folder waited to be delivered. It had arrived only minutes earlier with restricted markings that required the commander's authorization before anyone else could read it. No one in the room knew that a single page inside that folder would soon rewrite every first impression they had formed within the last 10 minutes. Morning formation began precisely at 0600 as the sharp whistle echoed across the training compound. Frost still clung to the edges of the obstacle course while the first rays of sunlight stretched across the parade field. Emily Carter stepped into position at the very end of the formation, standing as still as every other recruit while instructors walked slowly down the ranks inspecting uniforms, boots, and posture. Nothing about her appearance drew attention beyond the fact that she seemed almost invisible. She followed every instruction exactly as given, answered each command with calm confidence, and never attempted to stand out. Ironically, that only made the assumptions around her grow stronger. During equipment distribution, another recruit casually tossed her a heavy supply crate instead of carrying it himself. Emily caught it without complaint and walked it across the training yard before returning for another. By the time the morning inventory was complete, she had quietly transported more equipment than anyone else, yet nobody noticed because she never paused long enough to seek recognition. The recruits gathered near the mess hall afterward, balancing trays filled with scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee while conversations turned toward first impressions. A broad-shouldered private named Logan Pierce leaned back in his chair and nodded toward Emily sitting alone near the window. "She is keeping to herself because she knows she cannot keep up," he said confidently. Another recruit laughed. "I have seen that before. Transfers come in thinking they belong here until the real work starts." A third recruit shook his head. "I bet she ends up behind a desk before this month is over." The table erupted with quiet laughter. Emily continued eating without looking up. Every few moments she glanced through the window toward the training grounds, mentally mapping distances between buildings, access roads, observation towers, and equipment sheds. It was a habit developed over many years, but to everyone watching it simply looked like someone daydreaming. Later that morning the recruits were assigned routine duties before formal evaluations would begin. Some cleaned classrooms while others organized storage rooms or inspected communications gear. Emily received perhaps the least desirable assignment of all, sweeping the large vehicle maintenance bay by herself. Several recruits exchanged amused looks as they passed. Logan smiled and called out, "Looks like they already found the perfect job for the new girl." A few chuckles followed him down the hallway. Emily calmly picked up the broom and began working with quiet efficiency. She moved methodically from one side of the bay to the other, returning every misplaced tool to its proper location without being asked. An aging civilian mechanic paused for a moment, watching her identify equipment racks that had been mislabeled for months. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Across the base, Commander Ethan Brooks walked into the administrative office where a sealed personnel folder rested alone on the desk. The clerk immediately stood. "Sir, headquarters marked it for your eyes only." Brooks broke the security seal with deliberate care. Before opening the file, he looked through the office window toward the distant maintenance building where one recruit continued sweeping the floor in complete silence, completely unaware that within the next few hours the truth contained inside that folder would begin changing the way an entire unit saw her. The afternoon settled over the training compound with the steady rhythm of boots striking pavement and instructors calling out assignments across the motor pool. Emily Carter finished organizing the maintenance bay exactly 5 minutes ahead of schedule, placing every wrench, diagnostic kit, and storage case in perfect alignment before quietly returning the clipboard to the civilian mechanic. He looked around the spotless workspace, then back at Emily with a puzzled expression. He had expected someone new to miss half the inventory labels or ask for help locating equipment, yet she had corrected several long-standing filing mistakes without a single question. Before he could say anything, another instructor appeared at the doorway. "Carter, report to the logistics warehouse. They need extra hands." Emily answered with a calm, "Yes, Sergeant," and immediately headed across the base. She never asked why she kept receiving the least noticeable jobs. She simply completed each assignment with the same steady focus. Inside the warehouse, rows of neatly stacked supply containers stretched almost the entire length of the building. Several recruits were already complaining about the workload. Logan Pierce noticed Emily walking in and nudged the recruit standing beside him. "Looks like they found another box carrier." A few recruits laughed as one of them slid a hand truck toward her. "You can take the back section. Nobody else wants it." Emily nodded politely, accepted the assignment, and began moving containers one at a time. She never rushed, but she never wasted a movement either. Every box arrived exactly where it belonged, every inventory tag faced outward, and every aisle remained perfectly clear behind her. After nearly an hour, one of the warehouse supervisors quietly studied the updated inventory sheet. The numbers matched exactly. There were no missing entries, no duplicate counts, and no misplaced equipment. He frowned slightly, surprised that the first completely accurate inventory of the month had come from someone who had supposedly just arrived. Meanwhile, outside the warehouse, conversations continued to shape opinions that had little to do with facts. "She keeps getting support jobs because that is all she can handle," one recruit confidently declared. Another agreed. If she had any real experience, they would have put her on evaluations already. Logan folded his arms and watched Emily through the open warehouse door. You can always tell who belongs here, he said. Confidence shows. None of them noticed that Emily never reacted to their remarks. She simply continued working with the quiet discipline that had become second nature long before she ever stepped onto this base. Across headquarters, Commander Ethan Brooks sat alone in his office with the sealed personnel file finally open before him. The first page listed routine transfer information that revealed nothing unusual. The second page contained qualifications that caused him to lean back in silence. He slowly turned another page, reading every line twice before removing his glasses and staring out the office window. His expression remained controlled, but even he appeared genuinely surprised. After a long moment, he reached for the telephone on his desk. Have all senior instructors report to the conference room at 1600, he said calmly. There is something about recruit Emily Carter that every one of them needs to see. The remainder of the afternoon became the first unofficial test that none of the recruits realized they were taking. Formal evaluations had not yet begun, but every conversation, every assignment, and every careless judgment quietly revealed more about the people making them than about the quiet newcomer they continued to underestimate. Emily Carter reported to the outdoor training field where small teams were instructed to assemble temporary communications shelters, organize field equipment, and prepare inspection areas for the following morning. It was routine work, designed less to measure technical skill than to observe teamwork and discipline. Logan Pierce immediately appointed himself the loudest voice in his group. He pointed toward Emily without asking for her opinion. You can handle the equipment cases. We will take care of the important parts. The others nodded as though the decision required no discussion. Emily answered with a simple, understood, before lifting another stack of supply containers and carrying them across the gravel lot. She neither complained nor attempted to prove anyone wrong. While the others debated instructions and occasionally stopped to argue over the assembly guide, Emily quietly noticed that several support brackets had been placed in reverse order. She said nothing. Instead, she completed her assigned task and continued preparing the remaining equipment exactly according to the checklist. Nearly 30 minutes later, an instructor approached to inspect the shelter. His eyes immediately settled on the incorrectly installed brackets. Who assembled this section? He asked calmly. Logan confidently stepped forward. We did, Sergeant. The instructor pointed toward the mounting frame. Then explain why these supports are backward. Silence replaced confidence almost instantly. Before anyone answered, the instructor noticed another identical shelter standing beside it. Every connection, latch, and cable had been arranged perfectly. Who completed this one? He asked. Several recruits looked around until one quietly pointed toward Emily, who was securing the final storage case several yards away. The instructor simply nodded before marking something on his clipboard. No compliment followed. No criticism either. He merely walked away, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. Logan forced a laugh. Anybody can follow instructions from a manual. Another recruit agreed, although his voice carried less certainty than before. As the evening sun dropped lower over the training compound, Commander Ethan Brooks remained inside the conference room with several senior instructors gathered around the long oak table. Emily Carter's personnel folder rested open before them. No one spoke for several moments as each page passed from one set of hands to another. One instructor quietly reread a line, then looked toward Brooks. Is this complete? He asked. Brooks slowly nodded. Everything you are reading has already been verified. Another instructor leaned closer, studying the service history with growing disbelief. Then why would headquarters send someone with these qualifications through standard recruit processing? Brooks closed the folder with deliberate care. That, he replied, is exactly the question I intend to answer. Until then, nobody discusses this file outside this room. Across the base, completely unaware of the conversation unfolding behind closed doors, Emily finished returning the final equipment case to storage before picking up a broom to sweep loose gravel from the concrete walkway. Passing recruits barely glanced at her. To them she was still nothing more than the quiet transfer assigned to ordinary duties. They never noticed that the instructors had already begun watching her with entirely different eyes. The following morning began under a gray Virginia sky as cool air drifted across the training grounds and the entire unit assembled outside the headquarters building. The atmosphere felt different from the previous day. Nobody could explain why, but the instructors seemed unusually focused, exchanging quiet conversations before formation while Commander Ethan Brooks remained inside the administration office longer than usual. Emily Carter took her place in the final row exactly 30 seconds before the whistle sounded. As always, she stood quietly with perfect posture, neither drawing attention to herself nor attempting to disappear. Logan Pierce glanced over his shoulder and smiled at another recruit. "Watch," he whispered. "She will probably spend today sweeping another floor." The remark earned several quiet laughs. Emily heard them but showed no reaction. Her attention remained fixed straight ahead. After morning accountability, the recruits expected another series of routine assignments. Instead, a senior instructor stepped forward carrying a clipboard and announced that all scheduled activities were temporarily suspended until further notice. Confused looks spread across the formation. Training delays almost never happened without a serious reason. The instructor scanned the rows before speaking again. "Remain where you are. The commander has requested the entire unit report to the main briefing hall in 10 minutes. Questions immediately began circulating in low voices as the recruits walked toward the building. Some guessed there would be surprise inspections. Others assumed someone had violated regulations. Logan shrugged confidently. "Whatever it is, it has nothing to do with us." Inside the briefing hall, chairs had been arranged in perfect rows facing the stage. Officers occupied seats along the front while instructors stood quietly near the walls. Emily selected another seat near the back, placing her notebook neatly on her lap before waiting in complete silence. Around her, conversations continued in hushed voices until the side door opened and Commander Ethan Brooks entered carrying a thick personnel folder beneath one arm. Unlike his previous appearances, he did not begin speaking immediately. Instead, he walked slowly to the podium, placed the folder on its surface, and looked across every face in the room. His expression revealed neither frustration nor approval, only calm professionalism. The silence grew heavier with every passing second. Several instructors exchanged brief glances, already knowing what rested inside the folder but saying nothing. Brooks finally rested one hand on the cover before addressing the room. "Yesterday," he began evenly, "many first impressions were formed." His eyes moved deliberately across the audience. Some were based on observation. Others were based on assumption. Nobody moved. Even Logan sat straighter. Brooks continued. "Every member of this unit represents the standards of this command. That includes how we evaluate others before we know who they are." His words carried no anger, only quiet authority. Emily remained motionless in the back row, unaware that several instructors had begun watching her instead of the commander. Brooks slowly opened the folder to the first page, then paused once more before turning to the next document. A faint rustle of paper echoed through the otherwise silent hall. One instructor noticed Logan's confident smile slowly fading as curiosity replaced certainty. Brooks looked down at the record one final time before raising his eyes toward the audience. "Before today's training begins," he said calmly, "there is one personnel file that everyone in this room needs to understand." Every eye turned toward the podium as his hand settled on the page bearing the name Emily Carter. Commander Ethan Brooks rested both hands on the podium as the silence inside the briefing hall became almost tangible. No one shifted in their seats. No one whispered. Even the instructors standing along the walls remained completely still. Brooks looked down at the open personnel file once again before speaking in the same measured voice that had earned the respect of everyone serving under his command. "Most personnel records begin with assignments, evaluations, and routine qualifications," he said. "This one begins with something different." He carefully turned the first page. "Recruit Emily Carter successfully completed every required prerequisite before arriving here. That alone is not unusual." He paused, allowing the room to absorb the statement before continuing. What is unusual is that every evaluation was completed with the highest possible rating while serving in positions that required exceptional judgment, discipline, and leadership. Curious expressions slowly replaced confident smiles throughout the audience. Logan Pierce folded his arms more tightly, waiting for the impressive part that he assumed was coming. Brooks turned another page. Several portions of this record remain restricted. Those sections will remain restricted. His eyes briefly lifted toward the recruits before returning to the document. However, the information authorized for release is more than enough to explain why assumptions can become dangerous inside a professional organization. One of the senior instructors quietly nodded, remembering his own reaction when he had first read the same pages only hours earlier. Brooks continued reading. Emily Carter received repeated commendations for accuracy, composure under pressure, and consistent performance during advanced evaluations conducted before assignment to this command. He closed the folder slightly, then reopened it to another page marked with official certification seals. In addition, multiple independent review boards described her professionalism using the exact same phrase. He looked up from the podium. Quiet excellence. The words echoed softly through the room. Nobody laughed. Nobody even moved. Brooks allowed another moment of silence before continuing. Many people spend years trying to convince others they deserve respect. According to this record, recruit Carter spent years earning it without asking anyone to notice. Several recruits instinctively turned toward the back of the room where Emily remained seated exactly as she had been since the briefing began. Her posture had not changed. Her expression remained calm, almost uncomfortable with the attention beginning to shift toward her. She looked less like someone waiting to be praised and more like someone hoping the meeting would simply continue. Brooks noticed that reaction as well. You may also be wondering why someone with this background is sitting among recruits. He gently closed the folder. The answer is simple. Headquarters wanted to evaluate character before reputation. Skills can be measured in training. Character is measured by how people behave before they know who is standing beside them. The words settled heavily across the room. Logan slowly lowered his eyes toward the floor as fragments of conversations from the previous 2 days replayed in his mind. The casual jokes, the dismissive comments, the confident assumptions suddenly sounded very different. Brooks remained silent for several seconds before placing one hand on the closed personnel file. This briefing is not about celebrating one individual, he said calmly. It is about reminding every person here that the uniform never tells the entire story. Sometimes the most remarkable record in the room belongs to the person speaking the least. No one spoke after Commander Ethan Brooks closed the personnel file. The silence inside the briefing hall felt heavier than any command he could have given. It was not the uncomfortable silence of confusion anymore. It was the quiet realization that first impressions had collapsed all at once. Brooks stepped away from the podium and slowly walked across the front of the room, allowing every recruit time to reflect before he continued. Professionalism, he said calmly, is measured long before anyone receives recognition. It is measured when nobody is watching. It is measured when nobody knows your name. His words carried naturally through the hall without the need to raise his voice. Every recruit remained focused on him, yet more than a few glanced toward Emily Carter sitting quietly in the last row. She had not changed her posture. She had not smiled. She had not looked proud or embarrassed. She simply listened like everyone else. Brooks stopped walking and faced the audience once more. Over the last 2 days, recruit Carter accepted every assignment she was given. She did not request special treatment. She did not remind anyone of her qualifications. She completed routine duties with the same care she would have given to any other responsibility. That is exactly what this command expects from every person wearing this uniform. Several instructors nodded almost imperceptibly. They had watched Emily organize equipment, clean workspaces, and complete inventory tasks without a single complaint. Looking back, those simple jobs no longer seemed ordinary. They revealed something much more valuable than technical ability. They revealed discipline. Logan Pierce slowly lowered his head. He remembered every joke he had made during breakfast, every careless comment outside the warehouse, every confident assumption that now echoed in his memory with uncomfortable clarity. He realized that Emily had heard every one of them and had answered none of them. The absence of any argument suddenly carried more weight than any response ever could have. Brooks returned to the podium and rested one hand lightly on the closed folder. "Some of you may believe this meeting is about one remarkable service record," he said. "It is not. Outstanding records deserve respect, but character deserves even greater respect. Records tell us what someone has accomplished. Character tells us who they choose to become every single day." His eyes briefly met Emily's before shifting back across the room. "There are achievements inside this file that I am not authorized to discuss. Those details are not important today. What matters is that the person sitting among you never believed those accomplishments placed her above routine responsibilities or above the standards expected of everyone else." The room remained completely still. The atmosphere had changed so completely that even the newest recruits sensed it. Nobody saw Emily as the quiet transfer anymore. They saw someone whose confidence required no audience and whose professionalism required no applause. Brooks finally looked toward the back row. "Recruit Carter." Emily immediately stood. "Yes, sir." Her answer was calm, respectful, and unhurried. Brooks studied her for a moment before asking a question that surprised everyone in the room. "During the past 2 days, did you ever consider correcting the assumptions people made about you?" Every recruit instinctively turned toward Emily, waiting to hear the answer that would define everything that had happened since she first walked through the doors of the training compound. Emily Carter met Commander Ethan Brooks's eyes without hesitation, but there was no trace of pride in her expression. She answered in the same calm voice everyone had heard since the day she arrived. "No, sir." Brooks remained silent for a moment before asking, "Why not?" The room was so quiet that the faint hum of the overhead lights became noticeable. Emily folded her hands behind her back and replied, "Because my responsibility was to report for duty, complete every assignment, and earn the trust of the people around me through my actions. My responsibility was never to convince anyone that I deserved respect." Her answer lingered in the room long after she stopped speaking. Nobody expected such a simple response, yet it carried more weight than any list of accomplishments ever could. Brooks gave a slow nod, as though he had anticipated exactly that answer. "Thank you, Recruit Carter," he said. "You may be seated." Emily quietly returned to her chair. She did not look around the room to see who had been watching her. She did not acknowledge the dozens of eyes now following her every movement. She simply sat down exactly as she had before the meeting began. Logan Pierce felt the words settle heavily in his mind. He remembered assigning Emily the least desirable jobs, assuming she needed to prove herself before anyone else. Instead, she had approached every task with complete professionalism while he had spent more time talking than observing. Several recruits exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing that they had reached the same conclusion. One instructor quietly stepped closer to Brooks and whispered, "That explains every report we received yesterday." Brooks gave only a slight nod. "Exactly." He looked back toward the audience before addressing everyone once more. "There is an important lesson here that extends far beyond this training cycle. Confidence does not always introduce itself loudly. Experience does not always announce its arrival. The strongest professionals often spend more time listening than speaking." The recruits listened with complete attention. The atmosphere inside the briefing hall had transformed from casual curiosity into thoughtful reflection. Brooks continued, "Yesterday many of you judged another member of this command before learning a single fact about her. Today you have the opportunity to choose a different standard moving forward." He closed the personnel folder and handed it to the administrative officer waiting beside the podium. "This file will return to secure storage. What remains here should not be the details inside those pages. What should remain is the reminder that every person standing beside you has a story you may not know." The briefing officially ended, but nobody hurried toward the exits. Recruits who had been eager to leave only minutes earlier now remained seated, quietly considering the conversation they had just witnessed. Logan finally stood and slowly walked toward the back of the room where Emily was collecting her notebook. He stopped a respectful distance away. "Recruit Carter," he said, his voice noticeably different from before. Emily looked up. "Yes?" Logan took a slow breath. "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions that were unfair, and I spoke without knowing who you were. I should have treated you with the same respect I expect from everyone else." Emily offered a small, genuine smile that carried neither victory nor resentment. "Thank you," she replied. "That means more than you know." Around them, several other recruits quietly nodded in agreement, realizing that the most important lesson they had received that week had never been part of the official training schedule. The following week the training compound looked exactly as it always had. The morning whistle still echoed across the parade field before sunrise. Instructors still moved through the ranks with the same disciplined precision, and recruits still hurried between classrooms, maintenance bays, and training grounds carrying equipment for another full day of instruction. Yet something important had changed, even though there had been no new regulations, no special orders, and no ceremonial announcement. The change existed entirely in the way people treated one another. Emily Carter reported for duty at 0600 with the same quiet professionalism she had demonstrated since her first morning on base. She collected her assignments without hesitation, completed every task with careful attention to detail, and never reminded anyone about the conversation that had transformed the entire unit only days earlier. She did not expect different treatment because of her record, and she never behaved as though she had won anything. To Emily, service remained exactly what it had always been, a daily commitment to doing every job well whether anyone noticed or not. During equipment preparation that afternoon, a newly arrived transfer walked into the maintenance building carrying an oversized duffel bag and an uncertain expression that reminded several recruits of someone they had met only a few days before. Quiet whispers began forming near one corner of the room as people tried to guess the newcomer's experience and qualifications. Before the assumptions could spread any further, Logan Pierce quietly walked across the floor, extended his hand, and introduced himself with genuine respect. "Welcome to the unit," he said. "If you need help finding anything, just let me know." Several other recruits immediately followed his example. Commander Ethan Brooks observed the interaction from across the room without interrupting. A small smile appeared for only a brief moment before disappearing again beneath his usual composed expression. He understood that the most valuable lesson taught during the previous week had finally become visible. It was not visible through medals, records, or evaluations. It appeared in simple choices made by ordinary people who had decided to become better teammates. Later that afternoon Brooks crossed paths with Emily as she returned a checklist to the administrative office. "Recruit Carter," he said. She stopped and came to attention. "Yes, sir." Brooks looked toward the training yard where recruits were working together with noticeably different attitudes than before. "You handled a difficult situation with remarkable professionalism." Emily answered without hesitation. "Everyone is learning, sir." "Including me." Brooks gave a quiet nod. "That answer tells me even more than your personnel file ever could." Emily offered a respectful smile before returning to her duties. As she walked across the base, nobody saw a legendary record moving through the compound. Nobody saw restricted qualifications or commendations. They simply saw a fellow service member whose humility matched her competence and whose actions consistently reflected the values the uniform represented. Long after the training cycle ended, many recruits would remember very few details about schedules, inspections, or daily assignments. What remained clear was the lesson they carried into every future unit and every future assignment. Never measure another person's worth by first impressions, appearances, or assumptions. Listen before judging. Observe before deciding. Respect before concluding. Because the strongest professionals rarely need to announce who they are. Their character speaks long before anyone ever opens the file that tells the rest of the story.